There's a reason why people hate working the graveyard shift at the self-storage facility on Route 19, but no one ever says it out loud. It's not the boredom or the isolation. I didn't realize that until my third night, sitting in the little glass booth under the buzz of a flickering fluorescent light, watching the row of orange roll-up doors dissolve into darkness. People always look away when they hand you the keys, like they're glad it's your turn. I took the job for the easy pay. Sit in a booth, make a round every hour, check the cameras, lock the gate at midnight. Simple. There wasn't supposed to be anything unsettling about it, but the place felt off from the moment I parked my car and the headlights swept across the gravel lot. Everything seemed unusually quiet, even for 2 in the morning. The chain-link fence pressed tight around the property, as if it were holding something in instead of keeping people out. The office smelled faintly of bleach and something else. Something metallic, maybe like hot wires or old coins. The only sounds were my own breathing and the hum of the computer. I tried to read, but I kept catching phantom movement in the edge of my vision, like someone ducking out of sight behind the rows of units. The first strange thing happened around 3:10 a.m., just as I was pouring a cup of stale coffee. The monitors flickered, distorting the gray camera feeds, and for a second, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing at the very back of row D, facing the camera. No one should have had access past the gate that late. I blinked, and the image snapped back to normal, just an empty corridor between metal doors, the ground glittering with frost. I watched the screen for a long time, waiting for movement, but nothing changed. I convinced myself it was just a glitch, maybe my own reflection in the glass. But when I stepped outside for my hourly patrol, the air felt oddly thick, pressing close against my skin. My flashlight beam wavered as I walked the gravel path between the storage units. The sound of my own footsteps seemed unnaturally muffled, as if the rows of metal doors were sucking up the noise. I glanced back at the office window, half expecting to see someone sitting at my desk, but it was just my own pale reflection looking nervous and small. Halfway down row D, I heard a metallic rattling from further back, a storage door shaking, as if something inside was trying to get out. I stopped. The sound was faint but unmistakable, echoing in the cold air. I listened, heart crawling up into my throat. The noise died away as suddenly as it started. I forced myself to finish the round, checking each lock, shining my light across the numbers stenciled on the doors. Everything looked normal, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. Back in the booth, I tried to laugh it off. Maybe a stray cat or the wind, even though the air was dead still. I checked the monitors again. Nothing out of place. Around 4 a.m., I heard the sound of gravel crunching outside the booth, footsteps approaching slowly. My breath hitched. I squinted out into the darkness, but the yard lights were weak, and everything was just a blur of shadow. The footsteps stopped right in front of the window, but when I looked, there was nobody there, just the empty lot, the orange doors staring back at me. That was the first time I considered calling my supervisor. But what would I say? That I was spooked by a broken light? And some camera static? I told myself it was nerves, maybe just tiredness playing tricks. I tried to settle back in, but I kept glancing at the monitors, half expecting the figure from before to reappear. The silence pressed in tighter, as though the booth itself was growing smaller around me. Every creak of the metal roof, every whisper of air from the vent made me jolt. I kept opening and closing the logbook just to hear the sound of paper, anything to break that suffocating quiet. At 4:15, something changed. The lights along the fence began to flicker again, not just the usual dying buzz. This was rhythmic, on, off, on, like blinking eyes in the dark. I stood up, pushing my chair back hard enough to make it squeal. For a moment, I was certain someone was out there, moving between the rows, triggering the motion sensors. But the monitors showed nothing. The motion detector panel, with its little row of green lights, was dead. No signal. No record of movement at all. I tried to call out, just to hear my own voice, but the words caught in my throat. My mouth was so dry it felt glued shut. I told myself to get a grip. I grabbed my flashlight and forced myself to do another patrol. The night air bit colder this time, and the crunch of gravel under my boots was sharper, almost brittle. Walking between the units, I noticed something I hadn't before. The numbers on the doors seemed wrong. They were out of order. Where 217 should have been, I saw 312. The next one overread 218, then 115, then 217 again. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, even reached out and ran my hand across the cold metal to feel the numbers. They were real, not painted over or changed. I checked my phone, flipping through the company's map for the layout, but it didn't match what I was seeing. My hands started to shake so badly, I nearly dropped the light. A sound jerked my head up, the distinct hollow clatter of a door sliding open somewhere behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam wavering, and caught sight of a door at the far end of the raw rolling upward, inch by inch. No one visible. I called out, my voice too loud, cracking a little. "Hey, you're not supposed to be in here." The door stopped, half open. I waited, expecting someone, anyone, to step out. Nothing. No. Not even a rat. Swallowing hard, I started walking toward it, telling myself I'd find a raccoon. Maybe some wind had caught a loose latch. Every step got heavier, my chest squeezing tighter. When I got close enough, I saw inside, just stacks of boxes, dusty tarps, and the faint glint of a mirror propped against the back wall. My own reflection stared back, pale and distorted by spiderweb cracks. For a split second, it looked like there was someone else standing beside me in the glass, a blur of dark clothing. I spun around, but the space behind me was empty, the beam of my flashlight catching only swirling dust. That was the second time I almost walked off the job right then and there. But I didn't. I forced the door closed, checked the lock twice, and tried to convince myself it was just my nerves. I hurried back toward the booth, glancing over my shoulder every other step. When I reached the booth, I found the door hanging open. I was sure, I was absolutely sure, I'd closed it behind me. The logbook was on the floor, pages fluttering in the draft. The monitors were flickering, and for a second I saw that figure again on camera fourth, standing perfectly still at the end of row B, head tilted back as if staring straight at the lens. I slammed the door, locked it, and pressed my back against the glass, hands sweating so badly my radio nearly slipped from my grip. I tried the phone. No signal. The landline in the booth just gave a dead, hissing dial tone, the kind that made my teeth vibrate. I stared at the monitors, willing the image to settle, but the feeds warped and glitched, lines crawling like insects across the screens. Each camera flickered between static and flashes of the lot, the orange doors humming with an oily sheen under the lights. On camera fourth, the figure was gone. Or I thought it was, until I realized the shape was still there, closer, filling more of the frame, though the perspective never changed. I counted backward, slow and deliberate, breathing against the glass like it might keep whatever was outside from getting in. I wanted to believe I was just exhausted, that my brain was short-circuiting from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But the booth felt colder now, the air sharp and metallic as if a thunderstorm was about to break right overhead. I should have left then, just grabbed my keys and run for the car. But the idea of stepping out onto that gravel, into the open, was worse. A low resonance, almost a vibration, trembled through the floor. The glass in the booth's window began to pulse, just slightly, making my reflection shimmer. Somewhere deep within the rows of units, metal doors began to thud, one after another. Hard, deliberate, in a spreading pattern, like someone, or something, was moving steadily up the rows, pounding on each door as it passed. Bang, bund, bang, Tuti. Paina. Paidao. Des. Bontonka. The sound got closer, but not in a straight line. Sometimes skipping, sometimes pausing for long, breathless seconds, only to start up louder than before. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the vibration kept crawling up my arms, settling into my bones. Through it all, the monitors kept flickering. Between bursts of static I caught glimpses of shadows that didn't belong. Distorted outlines, impossibly tall and thin, stretched by the grainy black and white feed. A shape slipped between the units, always just out of focus, always turning away before I could catch its face. The thudding stopped. In the sudden silence, my own heartbeat was a drum in my ears. I was about to risk it, grab my jacket and sprint for the exit, when the radio on my belt crackled to life. It spat out my name, drawn out long and thin, the syllables warped like they were being pulled underwater. "You shouldn't be here," the voice whispered. It sounded like my supervisor, but wrong, each word clipped and hollow. I dropped the radio. It skittered across the linoleum toward the door. A car horn blared from the lot. I nearly screamed. It was my car. Lights flashing. Alarm howling like some wounded animal. I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the metal into my fist. I yanked the booth door open, cold air slapping me in the face, and sprinted across the lot, my footsteps echoing, echoing, echoing. Every shadow seemed to twitch in the corners of my vision. The fence rattled. The air smelled of burnt wires and wet earth. The storage units loomed on either side, their doors seeming to bulge outward, breathing with some hidden rhythm. I reached my car just as the alarm died. Everything went perfectly still. The world held its breath. I looked back at the booth. The lights inside flickered, and for a moment, I saw myself sitting at the desk, head bowed, hands folded neatly on the logbook. But I wasn't in the booth. I was standing outside, staring in through the glass. Keys trembling, I threw myself into the driver's seat and slammed the locks down. The ignition wouldn't turn. My breath fogged the windshield. The world outside smeared in watery reflections and twitching shadows. I looked up, and through the glass,